Hey, folks, this is Mike Lafferty. Thanks for tuning into the BAMF podcast. There's my charming co-host, Ross Watson. And here today we have Anthony Williams and Andy Lanning, who somehow stumbled into our shabby little dog and pony show to talk about their new comics project. But before we get started, I am contractually obligated to play this fabulous musical intro. And that glorious musical introduction assures you, gentle listener, that you are ingesting a high-quality, high-production values podcast. Finest, ethically sourced, farm-to-table geeky conversation for your podcast listening pleasure. So these gentlemen really don't require any introduction, but I love the sound of my own voice, so I'm going to give them one anyway. Andy Lanning has been doing comics for, just a very long time. Most recently on the podcast, talking with Ron Mars and us about 3 years ago for the Endless Winter event at DC. You might, Jasmine. I'm sorry, Jasmine, I missed you. Jasmine, Uber strategist. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's okay. I'm just checking that everything's okay with the recording. Have a good time, you guys.
Oh, thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, we're actually on the air. Everything's good.
Okay. Hello, audience. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. Well, hey, that was like when Kramer walks in, in the first bit of the Seinfeld episode. Anyway, Andy, Ross, go ahead, please.
I was to say, Andy's been in the business, as far as I can tell, since 1989.
Sounds about right.
Nope, 2 years earlier, Andy.
Oh, thanks, Ant.
Well, it's only because we both started at the same time.
So 87, awesome.
Yeah, we're very old.
Slightly after the Earth cooled and there were still dinosaurs and cavemen running around.
I was going to say, I keep saying it's like, I remember when all this was fields.
You might be best well known to a lot of our listeners as you worked with Mr. Abnett on Nova and the Annihilation War and the War of Kings and a lot of those high-profile Marvel cosmic events that were just awesome.
And because you didn't mention Legion, you didn't mention Guardians, lots and lots of projects with Dan Abnett, let's just say.
Indeed. And not to short you, Anthony, you are a very famous artist who's done a lot of work. Most recently on Batman, I understand. I know you did a lot of work.
No. I mean, the most recent stuff I've been working on is Judge Dredd's. I mean, I've been out of the game for a long time. Probably about 2001 was the last time I was working for Marvel and DC. But I used to have an up and coming inker called Andy Lanning who inked all my stuff back then, which was kind of cool.
Well, it's good to have friends, right? So I appreciate you guys joining us from across the pond. I know it's about midday for you guys over there at the center of civilization in England. I'm going to play the trailer for this new project you guys are working on with the sound off in the hopes that YouTube won't decide that I am besmirching someone else's copyright. But this is a new game called Slave Zero X. You guys are doing the promotional comic for. This is kind of an old school side scroller, and it was described to me as a dystopian biopunk setting. And I gotta say, it looks like a bunch of fun. Can you guys give us some background on it?
Yeah. We so Ant and I set up a little company called Ideas and Inks, where we work with people to basically doing a lot of sort of custom comic stuff and development stuff using comic book storytelling techniques with other people's IPs, and the crossover with video games. We like to say it's not so much a Venn diagram as just an overlapping circle. It's like it's like people are into gaming tend to be into comic books, and the guys at Ziggurat Games, they've got a great little setup. They've got the licenses to a lot of old games from PS1, PS2 days, even things like what we called the Mega Drive over here. I think it was the Genesis over there, the Sega Genesis and stuff like that. And they've got a model where they'll take these old licensed properties and they upscale them, and they make them better quality for today's systems. But they'll also do things like they'll add add levels. And in the case of Slave Zero, which was an old game from I think it was the early 2000s, which was a first-person shooter, and you can tell it's from the 2000s as well. It's got that kind of very, very blocky animation style. But what they decided to do was a prequel to that game, and do it in the side-scrolling genre. As you can see from this, it's got that real sort of, retro feel to it. And so not only is the game a prequel to Slave Zero, there's a lot of rich story world that they developed for Slave Zero, which the team at Ziggurat have kind of taken and run with and added loads and loads of extra story content that underpins and fills in all of the background stuff to the characters and the world setting and everything. And and as Ant was saying, Ant's been busy working on 2000 AD stuff, for the last 20-30 years. This is a genre that we're kind of hot wired to love over here. So we've helped them develop some comic book stories that are going to get printed as sort of custom comics that get bundled in with the game. And then there's going to be a sort of very high-end premium version that you can get, which will have a sort of hardcover version of the comic books stories in there, plus a load of art development from the game. So you get this sort of like premium art book / graphic novel that goes in a sort of high-end bundle.
To talk about the visuals a little bit, it's really cool looking, first of all, but it gives me kind of a vibe like the Heavy Metal Magazine or 2000 AD. It's got a really sweet retro cyberpunk. Yeah. It's just, and of course, stuff like Mega City thrown across there. It's just, everything's giving me that vibe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like I say, even down, like I say, to the and it's entirely coincidental, but the word Mega City being splashed in there is like instantly you're like, oh yeah, I'm in familiar territory here. But it's all so it's dystopian future. It's definitely got that, and I think one of the reasons they went for the side-scrolling nature and like, if you could play the music, it's very synthwave, it's very of that genre of game. Yes. Yeah, and it's brilliant. It's that, like, I didn't realize I loved that stuff till I started like watching all of the videos on this, and it's like, oh wow, that's a genre I actually really, really dig. And it's samurais, it's biomechanical, it's all about secret experiments and a megalomaniac sort of ruler of a dystopian city. Again, tick tick tick.
Super cool.
Yeah, it really does look amazing, and I would love to play the music, but I YouTube is so quick with the copyright strikes these days, yeah. So just very hesitant. But yeah, playing the video.
Fair use. Yeah.
But all right, I can maybe do a few seconds, but
no,
it really does look amazing.
I understand your caution, bro.
It's cool.
Yeah. Well, hey, I've got the URL scrolling across the bottom of the screens for anyone who's listening and not watching. That'll be ziggurat.games/game/slave-0-x. Is that the best thing to go to if I want to buy the game and get a hold of the comic?
Yeah, I think it. Going to the Ziggurat site will forward you to where you can get it. I know it's on Steam. The demo's on Steam at the moment in the Steam store. So, okay. There's it's got a good introductory level in it and a training zone. So you can go test it out. The other cool thing, particularly about doing an old-fashioned retro side scroller using today's technology, is they do really cool stuff like flip the POV. So you're side scrolling and then suddenly it'll move around and then you'll start side scrolling in a different direction and stuff like that. So it uses today's 3D technology to enhance what is essentially what used to be, and again, gents would probably have a similar age, the same old arcade style of side scrolling game, but now it moves around a lot more than those ever did.
That's really neat. I like it.
So what was it like digging into the comic and working together after so many years?
Andy and I we've found ways to work together for the last 35 years, one way or another. We've done a lot of crazy stuff over the years. Quite a lot of it not comic related, but yeah, now with Ideas and Inks, we're doing quite a bit of this now. So that's very cool, and it never feels any different. It's really nice. I mean, it's the fact, I still like working with him, which is nice. So,
I tell you, what's wacky about the fact, and again, we can, we'll move away from Slave Zero to a certain extent just to give you the backstory, but then we can bring it back again. But is that Ant and I shared a studio when we first started out in the 90s, in Brixton in London with Kev
riots going on outside.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, with Kev Hopgood, Iron Man artist at the time, and with Steve White, who was a colorist at Marvel as well. And we had this what seemed like a crazy idea at the time, which was, why don't people use comic books more to develop story ideas outside of comic books? And we were like, that would be like. And again, we were like looking at things like video game development and stuff like that. And it's like these things are teed up with a story world that I'm sure the people who buy that stuff would want to see stories from. And it went down like a lead balloon at the time, because at the time people were like, comics, that's for kids, and it's like, come round like 30 years later, everybody wants their own story world, and it's like, and what's the best way to develop your story world? Comic books, it's like,
I love the term story world. We use that a lot in tabletop RPGs, which you can see behind me. And you're right, comics and tabletop are both places where a lot of lore gets developed, a lot of worlds get created.
I mean, it's funny actually, because I played D&D at school, but got really into RPGs with Traveller. Did you ever play Traveller, Ross?
Yes, I did. I did. Great game.
Well, I can see from your Legion shirt, you're good, got good sci-fi cred at least. But you can, and again, from Ant and I, our background is, in British comics, a lot of it is sci-fi, and so to some extent, I always thought of Marvel comics as science fiction comics first and foremost, more than superhero comics, because the comics and the ones I was really into were things like Fantastic Four, Captain Marvel, it's like, the cosmic books and stuff like that. So it was like they were very sci-fi led for me. So the RPG I then got into was Traveller, which is the sci-fi version of D&D, basically spaceships traveling around worlds and stuff like that. And didn't realize that it's probably the best training wheels for a up and coming writer. Because again, it's like, doing sessions over a weekend where you're playing at 2 a.m. and you're making up stuff whole cloth because someone's gone down a road which you didn't want them to, but you've got to at least try to weave the story back to bring it back to where you've got it planned and stuff like that. It's like, so being a sort of a dungeon master is it really was, I've realized now, was my sort of training for being a comic writer,
for convoluted Marvel and DC continuity.
Yeah.
I had to. I guess those are things you can say when you're off the official payroll, but yeah, I had to give up. I still check in with the occasional event, but I couldn't tell you what's happening in the X-Men right now if I had a scorecard.
I think it's fair to say Marvel's space and cosmic stuff is way more developed than DC's, and honestly, Andy has had a lot to do with that. Everything, from Nova, Guardians of the Galaxy, Realm of Kings, you've done a lot of work with Marvel to build out their sci-fi, their space stuff, and I think that's really, really cool.
No, I mean, and with that, it was working with Andy Schmidt, who was sort of like the editorial director of all of the Annihilation stuff when it kicked off, and then with Bill Roseman after that. But those guys really loved the the cosmic stuff as well. And what was even better was the fact that no one was doing anything with it at the time, so we kind of had a blank slate to play with. And prior to that, we did sort of 3 years worth of Legion stories, where again we weren't given the blank slate, because there's literally a legion of the buggers. But what we were told to do with that working was strip it down to the core, to try to bring in a whole readership and refresh everything. It was sort of like, it was in a time where the book had just got a little bit stale, because it had, in the incarnation it had been going for, I think it was like, that run had been over 5 years worth of stuff, so we took it back down to like 12 members, and then bit by bit kept adding more and more and more until we got, so we did the Legion Lost storyline, and then brought it back to Legion Worlds, where you really did open it up to, this is a planetary based story world that we're playing in. So but just to quickly loop it back to what we're talking about with the Slave Zero stuff was so there's me and Amp going, like, develop story worlds, go to people, and it's what Star Wars did really well, which is stay in touch with your fan base when in between projects, because making movies takes a long time, making a video game takes a long time. People get into that stuff and they want to have a connection to that world. Star Wars did it with the toys, with the comics, with the novels and stuff, and actually I think kicked off that whole interconnected sort of IP world that they built out. But the same with this, the Slave Zero stuff is we can tell stories and backstories around these characters that you don't necessarily get to see in the game, and the stories we created for this were kind of prequel stuff that set up the game. So there are three different characters who appear in the game, who we kind of tell their stories, and we worked with 3 different artists on that. Normally Ant gets to get first dibs on the stuff we do with this, but Ant was more art directing on this side of the stuff. But we worked with Clark Bint, a British artist who's doing the art on the what's it bloody called? Rebel Moon, the comic book based on the Schneider movie series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Clark's fantastic. We worked with Andy McDonald, American artist who I met at Motor City Con and picked up one of his little his little art books, who's fantastic, really good artist. And with Anna Reedman, another British artist over here who I've worked with before, she's fantastic. She's really good. So not only did we get to explore slightly different stories with different characters, each one had its own distinct art style as well, which we thought played into the strengths of the storytelling side of things.
Well, kudos to Anthony Williams, because this game looks amazing, and it's exactly what I would think of if I was described this with just words. So really good job on bringing out a lot of the aspects. I love the image of the guy with no eyes, and it's just the mouth we can see. It's very AD Police, if you will.
Yeah.
Which I really dig. It's got that vibe, and yeah, you're doing great. That's all I can say. I mean, I wish our listeners could see this, because it's really impressive. So go check it out
Ross, if they go to ziggurat.games/slave-0-x, they can see it right now.
You beat me to it, Mike. I was gonna. I'm a good corporate soldier. I was gonna do exactly that. But the other really cool thing, and you can see, and you'll see this when you go into the website, is the game design team at Ziggurat, and the art director was Francine Bridge, and she had written a lot, and believe me, it is a lot. It's like a whole almost novel of a timeline backstory, and she did the artwork, the cover artwork for one of the stories, but all of that art design stuff, the look of Slave Zero and things like that, it's amazing, and that's going to form part of the art book that complements the graphic novel side of things. And I love that. So I don't know about you guys, but I think again, we're hot wired the same way, guys. You love seeing the behind the scenes stuff, don't you? Everyone loves to see how the sausage gets made, and it's like, you know, getting to see character designs, seeing them fleshing out the story world, and you know, and how they make the decisions they make. So each of these levels is set in a different location, a different zone of the city that have got such brilliant names. Like Zone 1 is called the Hell of the Rising Mists. And Zone 4 is the Hell of the 100 Devils, and and that zone there is the Hell of Many Colors, and it's the Pleasure District. So each of those zones has got a different flavor to it, and that's what we thought we'd do with the art. You know, when I said we'd go with different artists, was let's reflect the different styles, because each of the stories takes place in a different zone as well. And so we're playing with, you know, the idea that they've gone to the trouble of designing these to look aesthetically really interesting and different. So that's why we played with different art styles too.
So this is, if we were to break this down from a story point of view, this is really more of like a martial arts samurai type story, right?
It is. It's kind of you know, it's a cyberpunk version of that sort of tale, where instead of the demon infused sword or armor, it's like the cyberpunk version of that, where it's a bio-organic suit of armor that fuses with our hero Sue, and then they go on a sort of revenge mission, working their way up the various levels to take down the big bad, who's called the Sovereign Khan, or Sov Khan for short. But then there's some very cool subplots in there and stories again, which is what we were playing with. He's got a kind of like a his eyes and ears is a computer hacker called Aisha, and they guide him through the world, and they've got their own reason for vengeance. And then you've got each of the boss levels. That was one of them there, are called the calamities, and there's the 5 calamities, and so therefore there's, you know, sort of the 5 levels that you have to defeat. And they again, each one of those has got their own unique personality and unique story, which ultimately becomes a very personal story for the character of Shu, who's part of the, you know, the underground resistance, quite literally underground resistance, because they live in the sewers.
Nice. This looks really interesting. I'll be checking it out on Steam right after this. And like we said, folks, go to ziggurat.games, and this Slave Zero X is right there on the pull down menu. You can find that easily. Any closing thoughts? Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Well, Andy opened the door, so I've got to ask the question.
Okay.
Who is your favorite Legionnaire, and why is it Ultra Boy?
Very good. I think Ultra Boy is definitely in my my top 10, but I must say, my formative Legion years were when Mike Grell was drawing it. And I loved Wildfire and Timberwolf because
God, they're so cool.
Yeah, and Dawnstar because of that, and then I'm going, and then Karate Kid as well. It's like all of those ones that pop up from that run. But then I also absolutely love Giffin's 5 Year Later stories.
My favorite.
Absolutely,
favorite.
hands down. Yeah, I'm with you on that, because again, story world. It's a story world, all that back material that and Ultra Boy in that is fantastic, you know. So, you know, absolutely. It's one of those ones that kind of changes based on mood.
I have one thing I want to point out, because I don't know if our listeners know this, and I don't even know if Mike knows this. Andy, you're a writer and an inker, which is a very rare combination in comics. And I wanted to ask you, does your experience as an inker, how does that relate to your collaborative writing skills?
I think actually Ant can probably answer this better, because I've written a lot of stories that I've then inked and with Ant.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think the thing about Andy, and I will speak for you, Andy. The thing about Andy is you love the collaboration aspect of comics, don't you? You love the fact that you're working with people. It's so, because I mean, it can be a very lonely way to earn a living at times, you know, where you're locked away in a dark room for weeks on end. potentially not talking to anybody. But I mean, with Andy, it's always been, you know, in the old days, we'd be on the phone all day talking to each other while we were working. You know, I mean, obviously latterly now, you would just jump on a call like this and chat away. But I think the storytelling part of it, you know, the fact that when he's writing, Andy's got a really good sense of visually about what he's giving to somebody to draw, you know, far more so than you might get a lot of times. You know, you'll get a script through, and you know that the person who's written it is struggling to really understand what the capabilities are of the penciler, you know, and what you can do in a story. But Andy's a penciler, you know, he's a good penciler in his own right as well, you know. So I think he, you know, he plays all the roles. It's a bit dangerous giving him a pencil, so we just keep him on the right.
But this is the really wacky thing, though, is you remember Ant said we started out together, and it's kind of like a thread, I think, that's come full circle with this job. Is one of the reasons we kind of like, we're commercial artists, and so, you know, you work where the work is, right? But we started out in the UK for Marvel UK on the real Ghostbusters comic. And Ant started just like a week before me, I think, on that.
So show some respect, okay?
Yes. And, but again, that's drawing other people's characters on what they used to call on model. So we had loads of reference of the turnarounds of the characters and stuff like that. And so literally playing with someone else's characters and making up stories with them. And then after that, we went on to work at Marvel on the Clive Barker verse comics. It was a comic called Hokum and Hex.
That's right.
Yeah, if you remember back in the day. And again, it's like, so you know, this notion of sitting down and developing and working, you know, with other people's worlds and characters and stuff like that was really cool. But the Ghostbusters one particularly was, I took in 3 pages of continuity art that I drew, and I made up a story in my head because I wanted it to show I could do storytelling. It got me the gig. But Richard Starkins, who was the editor at the time, said to me, "Can you finish the story, please? I want to know what happens." And so
one day he will.
Yeah, I've left him hanging for 35 years.
With your last dying breath.
Well, if you're looking for a closing thought, I think the only other thing I would like to ask is just, what is, for Anthony and Andy, what's your favorite story bits about Slave Zero?
I'll let you lead off, Andy, because then I can think.
Okay. So the thing with Slave Zero X, which I found really interesting to dig into, was the setting, because it's a video game, and so you're just going to enjoy running around, hitting, slashing, blowing things up and everything like that. But the fact that there is a rich setting to that, as I alluded to before, each level's got its own look and its own design, its own boss. You know, the best types of video games, the best type of anything comes when you've got a really cohesive story behind it, because it just makes the whole experience richer, you know. And there are cut scenes in this that go into the story between the characters and stuff like that. And so the main character, Slave Zero, which is, in all intents and purposes, meant to be literally a slave, just an organic suit that does its owner's bidding, actually develops its own personality, its own ego, and is then cast adrift as a defect and found by the Resistance, and therefore they then bonds together with our human hero character. It's like, that's pretty cool as well. And apart from anything else, it looks awesome. It looks.
Can't deny that at all. Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, and you know, from my perspective, I mean, first and foremost, just, you know, as an artist, the art design on it is lovely. I mean, the way Francine developed, you know, this whole new look for it, the very dark dystopian cyberpunk look looks amazing. But then I also, because I wasn't drawing the stories, and you know, and Andy was writing them, I have the pleasure of seeing how the 3 stories that we did really fill out the world. You know, they really do. I mean, and because they are so, each one is completely different flavors. When you see them, you'll see exactly what I mean. And it really gives a sense of a much bigger world. You know, and I think that's the fun of doing it. Is and with most of the stuff that we try and do is taking that, you know, taking something where somebody's put their heart and soul into it, and we get a chance to actually expand this world out and go back to the word story world. I mean, that in the end is bottom line of, you know, what we try and do.
Sweet. Well, we'll definitely be checking this out. So you guys have a company where you pitch these kind of promotion ideas to other firms like Ziggurat?
That's correct. Yeah.
Can you give us a hint of anything you guys have coming up in the future?
Yeah, for sure. We've got a website, ideasandinks.com. And in fact, there's a little sort of like sting video we got up front, which has got artwork from the comics in it, and I'm pretty sure, and we'll check with whether Jasmine pops up again, but we can check with her. I'm sure we can get you guys PDFs of the stuff to have a look at as well, to check it out, because
that would be amazing, sir. Thank you.
I'm sure we can sort that out for you, lads.
All right. Well, just one last time, I want to say it, ziggurat.games/game/slave-0-x. Check it out. Or if you're on Steam, like all the cool kids are, you can check out the free demo right now. So, Andy, pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, and to you too.
Cheers, Mike. Cheers, Ross.
Been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And to all listeners and viewers, we'll catch you next time on the Banff Podcast.